Game number 4 of the FIDE World Chess Championship 2023. Ding Liren with the white pieces. We see c4, Jan Nepomniachtchi with the black pieces, knight to f6. The players are playing something different every single game. This is kind of an exciting match so far. We see knight to c3, pawn to e5. This is how a lot of the top grandmasters are playing these systems now. And I think this is an exciting way to play the game too, because you could play c5 and then you get what's called a symmetric English. But this is a different pawn imbalance, right? Black has the e pawn up, white has the c pawn up. So knight f3, knight c6, pawn to e3. This is a very common setup for Ding. White can either play for d4 or play for e4 later on. Bishop to b4. This threatens to capture and play d6, put this bishop on the light squares, maybe play f5 later, and queen c2 by Ding. Bishop takes c3, b takes c3. This is just as good as taking back with the queen, so these double pawns aren't bad at all for white, and it's actually going to build a big center for white later when he plays for d4. Pawn to d6, pawn to e4. This looks a little bit strange. Why do you move this pawn twice? Magnus Carlsen and many other top players have played this move, and let's kind of take a look at the imbalances here. Let's see what's going on. Why are we allowed to play this move twice? So, white has the bishop pair. That's a small advantage, but white also has the doubled c pawns. That's going to be an advantage for black on average. And what black has going for him is these solid pawns in the center, this pawn chain pointing towards the king side, the light square bishop, opposite color of those pawns, so it's a really good bishop, and the potential for f5, knight h5, knight f4, going for a king side attack. So based on the pawns, black wants to attack king side, white controls the center, because d4 is coming, and white controls the queen side. So look for that dynamic, black playing king side, white playing center and queen side. So castle by Jan, bishop e2, and now we see knight to h5, exciting chess by Jan. He wants to plug the knight into f4, attacking g2, attacking e2. So here Ding has to play the d pawn, and he goes for the aggressive pawn to d4. d3 was also a good move there. So these players are looking for a decisive result. Ding builds the big pawn center, 3 pawns on the 4th rank. Now we do see knight to f4 by Jan, a committal move. He doesn't have to stick the knight into f4. He could bring the queen out. He could look to play rook e8, play more solid, but that's not his style. He goes for knight f4 right away, and Ding captures. A great decision. He doubles the f-pawns for Jan, and this strengthens his center, right? Because that e-pawn for black just left the e-file, moved over to f4. This strengthens the center for Ding. So now we're looking at a small advantage for Ding. There was a very slight inaccuracy by playing knight to f4 by Jan, but it reduces the chances of a draw, I think. All of a sudden, the game's getting a little bit more interesting. None of these pawns are locked up in the middle, and we still have some imbalances with the pawn structure. Castle, queen to f6, a good move. Rook e1. And at this point, Jan should look to play g5 at some point and attack over here on the king side. But I think what we're going to see is both players want to improve their positions first before doing anything too committal. So Ding wants to move some of these center pawns up. Jan wants to move a king side pawn up. But let's get the pieces ready to go. And this is something that we can all learn from them. Prepare your pieces before making a committal pawn break. Rook to e8. Bishop to d3. I give this move a dubious mark with help of the computer. Small slip up by Ding. I think he should have played pawn to c5 here. And after d takes c5, pawn to e5, attacking the queen. Queen moves, rook to d1. It's a pawn sacrifice, and it's only a temporary one because this strengthens the attack for Ding. Look at how every piece is well placed. This bishop is about to move out soon. Jan's pieces are looking kind of sad right now. Knight on c6 is probably the only good piece. Bishop and rook in the corner, not looking so great. So that would have been a chance to play for a larger advantage. Bishop to d3, still very slight edge for Ding, but I think it's a small slip up. Bishop to g4. Knight retreats back to d2. Knight a5, attacking this pawn. And notice how Jan likes to play these knight out to the rim moves. He's just a dynamic, active player. He likes to press his opponent. And here Ding makes the decision to play c5. Strong move. He's using his doubled pawn to attack in the center, again trying to strengthen the other center pawns. D takes c5, he goes e5, so temporarily sacrificing this pawn on c5. Queen to h6. This move was required because bishop takes h7 check was a threat, so this e-pawn moved up, hitting the queen and hitting h7 at the same time. This is the only good move for Jan. Pawn to d5. So there's no interest by Ding in capturing this pawn back. Instead, he's pushing these pawns up the board and highlighting how clumsy this knight is out here on a5. So very good strategic decision by Ding. Jan is definitely playing defensive now. Rook a to d8, pawn to c4. Locking these pawns in the center, also sticking that knight out there on a5, making it harder to get back into the game. Pawn to b6 by Jan, potentially creating an escape route for the knight and solidifying the center. So both players are still in that let's improve the pieces mode before we do anything too decisive with the pawns. Bishop to e4, queen c3, and now Ding offers the bishop trade. So why is he offering the bishop trade? Let's think of this again in terms of imbalances. We know this knight on a5 is a really poorly placed piece. We know the knight on d2 is currently defensive, but he has really good squares coming up. He comes to e4, and he's going to help these pawns attack. So this knight is better than this knight. The bishop is black's best piece. Let's trade off the best piece and play with the other imbalances. White's got the advantage in the center with the pawns. Let's get rid of black's best minor piece and play knight versus knight with better pawns. I think it's a good decision by Ding, and he has just the very small edge still that he's going to try to press for the win. Knight back to b7, rook e2, looking to double rooks on the e-file, f6, and at this point I think Jan needed to make a pawn break because he can't just allow Ding to keep improving this position while he sits back and plays defensive. So he plays f6, it's not a bad move, and we see e6 by Ding. So now we're even more in that white controls the center, black controls the kingside territory, right? Because this is a protected pass pawn protected by the d pawn, and now Jan really has to play kingside. He has 4 pawns over here on the kingside against Ding's 3. So what's he going to do? Is he going to look to play g5 at some point? He starts with knight d6, and look at how he controls all of these dark squares. Really interesting dynamic, the control of the dark squares for black and the control of the light squares for white. So at this point we see rook a to e1, doubling of the rooks like we talked about, knight to f5, and the computer doesn't love this move. I think the reason why is the knight has a nice outpost here on d6. It's stopping these pawns. Why move the knight out to f5 unless there's a good plan for it? I think it's because Ding wants to play aggressively. He's looking to play moves like knight to d4, maybe knight to h4. We've seen these kind of moves by him before. And at this point, Ding captures, trades the bishops off, and plays rook to e4. And here, the commentary team kept looking at one sacrifice, and it's after knight to d4. This was not played in the game. There's rook takes d4, c takes d4, queen takes d4, and white is significantly better here. This knight can hop around the board and cause problems for black, but these 2 rooks are just stuck back here on the e-file. They can't move, and they're blocked by this passed pawn on e6. So even though white's down the exchange here, down 2 points of material, this is going to be better for white. Okay, so then you have to think, well, what is this knight doing here? It doesn't want to go to d4 because of the sacrifice. Maybe he needs to head back to d6 at some point. Queen to h6 played by Jan, guarding the f4 pawn. The rook was attacking. Queen f3, double attack. And the only move here is pawn to g5. And this was not played in the game. Jan missed this. Or he, for some reason, decided not to play it. Now, there's this cool line, g4 by Ding could be played. Knight to d6, offering the exchange sack. And then you can play a move like pawn to a4 here. You can allow this capture, knowing that the exchange sack favors white. Let's go a couple moves deeper. What could happen? Queen g7, king g2, h5. Both players are looking to play on the h-file. This is an extremely interesting position, and I think there's winning chances for both sides. But for some reason, Jan did not play g5. I don't know why he didn't play it. The position's been calling for it for a long time. The commentators were really mentioning it too. He only spent 2 minutes on this next move, and it's a huge blunder. He played knight to d4. And I think this is one of the weaknesses by Jan. He's a quick, decisive player, but sometimes he makes quick blunders and completely self-implodes. Knight to d4 is a huge blunder, and he really should have spent more time on it. He had, I think, over 30 minutes on the clock at this point. Rook takes d4, and this is a brilliant move by Ding. He was ready for it, and this is a great version of the exchange sacrifice, because after the pawn takes back, now we see knight to b3, going to round up this pawn, head to c6, head to f5. This knight is all over the place. Pawn g5, now he plays it. Knight takes d4. Jan is up the exchange, but the position is technically lost. So it's up to Ding now to see if he can convert it, because black is going to try to hold solid here for as long as possible. Queen g6, pawn to g4, strong move, supporting the f5 square for that knight outpost. So Jan takes it. That's the best play. F-pawn takes back, and now we see the queen by Ding supporting this f5 square. So the knight wants to head here next. Black cannot get out of this. He has to play a different move, allowing knight to f5. And look at this beautiful knight parked here on f5, ready to win the exchange back at any time. So really there's always going to be tactics here to win the exchange back. But Jan does try to move the rook out of the way, maybe going for some counterplay on the h-file. We see queen to e4. This is threatening knight to e7 check, creating a discovered attack on the queen. So Jan sidesteps the king. And now we see e7 by Ding. Ding is playing very accurate moves here. This pawn is only one square from queening, and it's defended by 3 pieces. So that pawn's going to be there forever. Queen f7. Pawn to d6, another top move. And here Jan has to capture, because otherwise that pawn goes to d7 and it's game over right away. Knight takes back. Here we see a fork. So Ding can get this material back at any time. And you might be wondering, what happens if queen takes e7? And this was not played by Jan, but after queen takes e7, knight takes e8, and Ding is simply up a piece. If queen takes queen, rook takes back. So instead, Jan plays queen g8. He's trying to keep the game going. Ding cashes in on that exchange and plays queen e6. So the material is now equal, same number of pawns, queen and rook for both sides. Ding has this protected pass pawn that's never going anywhere, and all he has to do is figure out, how do I get that pawn to queen? And it's going to take some maneuvering. King g7, rook f1, creating a double attack on f6. So this is a position that I could see club level players maybe making some mistakes from the white side, allowing black back into the game. The commentary team, though, who are all super grandmasters, they were saying that black could resign at any point here, and the computer agrees with that. But, instead, Jan decides, let's try to hold on. He plays rook h6, rook to d1 by Ding. Now the rook wants to head to d8, attacking the queen, which allows the promotion of the pawn. Pawn to f5. Jan's trying to get tricky here. He could resign, but what he's looking to do is figure out if his king can run. And the commentary team found this move order as well. Queen e5 check, king moves, queen takes f5, rook blocks, queen h7, and all of a sudden this king is running. With best play though, this is a checkmate in 15 moves. And here Ding goes into a deep think. He had over an hour on his clock because we're at move 45. They got a bonus at move 40. And you needed to play precisely. Rook to e1 check. That's the mate in 15 moves. But I like what Ding did here. He plays queen to g7. And the problem for black is it's like a zugzwang. There's no good moves for black. Rook to e1 check is the threat, and then this rook just drops. So what does Jan do here? He plays rook to g6, defended by the queen. But now we see a strong move by Ding, queen to f8. And here Jan resigns. So the problem is if rook to g8 is played, trying to defend everything, there's actually queen takes g8 check, queen takes back, and rook to d8. What a beautiful sequence. The queen moves somewhere, and then Ding makes a queen. So extremely accurate play by Ding. He is back in the match, gets his first win on the board. That's game number 4. We have a rest day tomorrow, and we will be back on Saturday for a recap. Check our link in the description. We have a free game analysis live game analysis session coming up on YouTube. You can submit your games and I will make sure to go over them. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next recap.